Driving down Wesley Drive, Mike Morrison looked at every house. Of the 11 houses from the corner to his own, Mike built 8. The remaining 3 were erected by John Piercy, a local contractor. There was competition, but not aggressive, not hostile, between Piercy's construction company and Curtis Construction, Inc., where Mike worked. One day John didn't have enough concrete, so Curtis sent his workers to help John finish pouring. Of course, we know that only the southeast corner will remain standing after the first good snowstorm, Lyle Curtis joked as they drove away from the site. "Come on, Curtis," John laughed. The 2 companies also gathered for an Independence Day picnic at Jordan Air Park and competed in barbecue, softball, and horseshoe throwing. Then everyone sat together, ate, and watched the evening fireworks. Mike felt strange, but not worried, when he saw John Piercy's Mercedes-Benz SUV with the license plate Piercy 1 in front of his house. Mike pulled into the garage, took another look at the SUV, and then closed the garage door. "Hey, Rhonda, what's John Piercy doing here?" Mike shouted as he entered the house. "In the living room," Rhonda answered loudly. Mike entered the living room, preparing to shake his guest's hand. But what he saw made him lower his hand. Rhonda and John were sitting together on a small sofa. Rhonda looked uncomfortable when Mike entered. John had a smug smile on his face. Michelle and Mickey were sitting on the long sofa, and both children looked excited. So what's going on here?" Mike asked Rhonda. Mike, it's hard to say," Rhonda muttered, looking at the floor, at the kids, at the coffee table, anywhere but Mike. "Then spit it out already," Mike ordered, his voice becoming harsh. "He has a swimming pool," chimed in 12-year-old Michelle. "And a boat," Mickey added. "Said he'd take me to Merrily Lake and everything." "And me too," 10-year-old Michelle screamed at her brother. "Look, Mike," John began. "You." "Don't say another word," Mike interrupted him, his voice sounding harsh. "Mike, don't make this any more complicated than it already is," Rhonda responded sharply. Sorry, I didn't realize I was the problem," Mike said sarcastically. "Now is not the time for," John began roughly. "Said, not a word from you, snake," Mike muttered. John tried to stand up, but Mike pushed him back hard. "Mike, do not dare," Rhonda screamed. "I thought you were going to act like a man, but I see," John hissed. "What in the words, not a word, do you not understand?" Mike asked, punching the man in the mocking face. Mike almost smiled at the stunned expression on John Piercy's face. But his family was falling apart before his eyes. His daughter, his sweet angel, was rejecting him for the pool. His boy, his son, his tiger cub was ready to throw him on the compost heap for a few fishing trips on the boat. The last time Mike took Michelle to the gym, her daughter spent the entire time admiring the cute boys and posing for attention. She didn't even dip her toes in the water. And Mike took Mickey to Lake Merrily several times. They were fishing, father and son. Each time he had to drag the boy with him. True, it was not on a boat, but they stood on the shore and cast fishing rods. The few times Mickey managed to catch a fish, it was Mike who took the fish off the hook. And when they came home, it was Mike who was cutting up the fish. After Rhonda, Michelle, Mikey, and a somber John left the house, Mike sat down at the kitchen table with an ice-cold Coors and read the divorce petition. Rhonda requested primary physical custody of the children, granting Michael Arthur Morrison, SR, abundant visitation rights to the 2 minor children. She also requested $400 a month for each child, plus half medical expenses, half educational expenses, and other incidental expenses to be discussed as needed. The microwave food was tasteless and turned to lead in his stomach, but Mike knew he needed to eat. He was hungry when he walked into his house and knew he needed something to help him soak up the 3 or 4 or 5 beers he planned to drink that evening. He drank 2.5 cans of beer. Mike decided there was no point in getting drunk. He had an early morning the next day. Wife or no wife, Children or no children, he had a job to do. And Rhonda Gladys Livingston Morrison wasn't worth the hangover. Rhonda was a rather toothy, flat-chested 18-year-old when Mike met her at an auto parts store. The girl muttered angrily to herself, trying to figure out which battery to buy for her Nissan. "There's a table here," Mike said quietly. "Uh-huh, but my car isn't here," Rhonda replied sharply. "And Tweedledum is too busy over there to get off his fat ass and come over here." "So what kind of car do you have?" Mike asked. He found the right battery and even offered to install it for her. The Tweedledame glared at her as he completed the purchase. "So where is the car?" Mike asked, carrying a heavy battery from the store. "On 17th and Jackson," Rhonda said bitterly. "We had to walk here." Mike drove his Ford F-250 to the apartment and installed a new battery. Charles Bud Livingston, Rhonda's father, came out and talked to Mike. Bud learned that the 24-year-old had a steady job at Curtis Construction, was an auto mechanics hobbyist, and liked a cold Coors beer. "Well, son, if you're going to date my daughter, you need to save every penny," Bud laughed. The girl never saw a shiny thing she didn't like. "Dad," Rhonda exclaimed, glancing at the attractive young man. Mike Morrison was blond, with a strong, square face and light blue eyes. His muscular body and tan skin told Rhonda that he spent a lot of time in hard physical labor, a lot of time in the sun. If she hadn't been so angry when they first met, she would have flirted with him. Just when she got up the courage to start flirting, to start pushing her compact ass towards him, her father came out of the apartment. Just as she was about to, accidentally, touch the large lump she saw in the young man's tight jeans, her father began to speak. Rhonda suppressed a shiver as Mike looked at her. His face showed no emotion, just a cool little smile. "Good to know," Mike nodded to Bud, closing the hood of Rhonda's car. Frank Tweedledum Mayers called Mike a few days later. "Hey, Mike, you know that snotty bitch helped with the battery the other day?" Frank laughed. "I came here looking for your phone number. Give it to him?" "Well, yes, I think. Of course, go ahead," Mike agreed. Mike learned that Bud Livingston was right. Rhonda suffered from the Moore disease. She saw something, saw that it was good, and she wanted more of it. When Mike asked the girl out on a second date, Bud showed Mike Rhonda's bulging closet and showed Mike a collection of shoes, boots, sandals, and 6 pairs of flip-flops. 6 pairs. 6 pairs of flip-flops. "Hey, Rhonda, that's one for each finger, right?" Bud teased. On the second date, Mike also learned that Rhonda liked sex. Pregnancy agreed with Rhonda. Mildly attractive when they first started dating, Rhonda blossomed as her pregnancy progressed. By the time she gave birth to Michelle Christina Morrison, Rhonda's 31 breasts had ballooned to 34C size, and her flat ass had blossomed into a nice round booty. Classes in spinning, Pilates, and yoga trimmed her baby bump, and Rhonda began to attract attention when she walked into the shops at Rackwell Falls Mall or the trendier stores at Benhurst Mall. At first, Rhonda really resented her daughter. The baby received all the attention, all the gifts from Mike, from Bud and Gladys Livingston, from Mike's colleagues. She convinced Mike that she needed to get braces, convincing him that if she became more beautiful, she would receive more attention, more gifts, more compliments. Rhonda's braces had just come off, revealing a beautiful smile when they found out she was pregnant again. "Is it true? My ass just hit the top 4 and I'm pregnant again," Rhonda screamed. Michael Arthur Morrison, you're having a vasectomy. Do you hear me?" "HM. No. No one will cut Big Mike," Mike said calmly, rocking the sleepy baby. Being a mother limited Rhonda's demands a little, shortened her wish list a little. She seemed to come to the realization that some of her wants and needs had to give way to those of her children. Now sitting at the kitchen table, Mike poured the rest of his 3rd beer down the sink, rinsed out the can, and threw it into the recycling container. In the morning, he will ask Lyle to recommend a good lawyer. In general, he agreed with the claims in Rhonda's lawsuit. She didn't work, so she had to get primary custody of their children. He was ready to pay her alimony, ready to pay half of her medical and educational expenses. He wondered how Rhonda planned to pay the other half. She probably persuaded John Piercy to agree to pay the other half. But Rhonda also demanded half of his retirement accounts, demanded half the value of his house, even though Mike owned the house outright before they met. And Rhonda hasn't contributed a dime to her retirement account. Lyle Curtis looked at Mike when he approached him for advice on a good lawyer. He listened, his face getting redder and redder as Mike talked. This dishonest, this snake, Lyle thundered. That's what I named him, Mike smiled sternly. I thought, damn it, now I regret that I didn't say anything. Damn it, Lyle said angrily, rummaging through his wallet. Something about. Mike hinted as Lyle read one of the business cards in his wallet. At a picnic, I saw John hanging around Rhonda. They seemed too friendly, Lyle admitted, handing Mike a business card. Here, this is Trenton's daughter. She helped Mary Lynn not get half the company when she got up and left me in the past. Oh my God, it's been 3 years now. Anyway, it seemed like John was paying too much attention to Rhonda. But then Rhonda was in that outfit, you know? Mike actually remembered the outfit. Rhonda transformed a man's shirt into a crop top, tying it under her 34C breasts, leaving her bare, flat stomach on display, and showed off her new gold belly button earring. The cropped shorts also showed off her slender, tanned legs. Barbara Trenton was a woman with a stern face and a slender, muscular body. She listened carefully to Mike's story, reviewing checks and bank statements, noting all of Rhonda's expenses and her lack of deposits into the family account. She then revised the divorce petition, made some changes, and sent the amended documents to Brian White, Rhonda's lawyer. I'll probably have to go to mediation, but I have to tell you, Mr. Morrison, looking at the amounts your wife likes to spend, it's amazing how you manage to save anything at all, Barbara admitted to Mike. And considering she didn't contribute a penny. Yeah, well, Lyle is a good person to work for, Mike said. Uh-huh, Barbara smiled lightly. Barbara's intuition was correct. They actually had to go to mediation. Rhonda vigorously disputed the changes to the lawsuit. She considered the money hers, considered the house hers. Between the time she left and the meeting with the mediator, Rhonda also made it difficult for Mike to see his children. Every time Mike complained, Rhonda would smirk and tell him that if he had just signed the original claim, he would have had more time with the kids. Lyle Curtis also contributed during this time. He told anyone who would listen about how John Piercy stole another man's wife, stole another man's children. Construction material suppliers suddenly refused to provide credit to Piercy's construction company, having to pay cash for bags of concrete. Pallets of bricks, rebar, 2-4s, and CDX plywood took a significant toll on John's available funds. But when his bank delayed financing the construction of speculative houses in a new area, John was furious. When John Piercy applied to build a new office building in Ruckle Falls, the council reviewed the proposal, then looked at a smiling John Piercy. The company's CEO did not smile. You live with a woman you're not married to? Asked Harley Rittmuller. What? What does it matter? John stammered, the question taking him by surprise. Is one of them already married? Asked Leon Weishman. Piercy Construction Company has been doing quality work for over 20 years, John shouted. This is a $4 million job, Mr. Piercy, Harley said emotionlessly. $4 million of our dollars, added George Schmidt. And we just don't feel comfortable giving $4 million of our dollars to someone who has proven himself to be untrustworthy. So, thank you, but we decided to go with someone else, Mr. Piercy, Harley concluded. John Piercy was furious when he saw the happy faces of Lyle Curtis, Harley Rittmuller, Leon Weishman, and Mike Morrison on the evening news. The newscaster was talking about the groundbreaking ceremony that had taken place earlier that day. $4 million. 4 damn millions, John muttered bitterly as the four men laughed as they all tried to take the symbolic shovel together and dig up the first piece of earth. John's mood worsened when Ray Manghetti, one of his painters, informed him that his check had been returned to NSF. Ray had worked for John since the first day of his business and now stood smiling nervously in John's office. "I mean, it happens, Ray said. "Frida, do you know my wife? She swears she sent the payment, Finds it 2 days later still in her purse, But hey, I need to get paid, When a homeowner hired John to renovate his basement, John discovered that all of his workers were now working for Curtis, working on the construction of the Rackwell Falls Baptist Church or in the Rittmuller office suites. He was left with no choice but to inform the homeowner that he would not be able to complete the job. Brian White, the lawyer John hired for Rhonda, also insisted on payment. Rhonda tried to use one of her credit cards and discovered that Mike had canceled all the cards. Bud reluctantly agreed to loan Rhonda the money. "Honestly, I think you should go apologize to Mike, beg him to forgive you," Bud muttered to his daughter. "I think I remember you married him." She promised to refuse all others. "Yes, I remember well. I paid for that wedding." Michael Skiff, a trial mediator, reviewed Rhonda's claim she filed and the amended claim Mike filed, documentation, reviewed bank statements, heard from both sides. His face darkened when Barbara Trenton played the recording of Mike complaining about lack of access to his children and Rhonda's swarthy response that if he had signed the original lawsuit, he would have had more time with the children. "So, Mrs. Morrison, children are pawns. Do you want money? Are you using children?" Michael asked sharply. Not really," Brian White chimed in. "But Mrs. Morrison does have expenses." "Mr. Morrison has expenses too. And Mr. Morrison faithfully sent child support every month," Michael pointed out, pointing to Mike's bank statements. "As for Mrs. Morrison's own expenses, I can offer Mrs. Morrison a job." Mike's 39th birthday came a month after the empty mediation victory. He called Rhonda on her new cell phone, which was paid for by John Piercy, and asked the children to spend time with him in celebration. "Nothing special, just go to Benny's Burger Bar, Mike said, trying to sound cheerful. It was still painful for him to talk to his wife. Her betrayal was still fresh. Rhonda got dressed up and did her hair for the mediation and looked good and beautiful. "Your dad wants to take you to Benny's Burger Bar. It's his birthday," Rhonda said sharply. Mike's heart broke when he heard his daughter sigh. "God, why would I do this?" Mike?" Rhonda started looking for excuses. But the conversation had already been interrupted. Rhonda sighed and dialed his number again. The answering machine answered, and she left a message. "Hey, the call must have ended. You're probably still talking," she said, trying to sound cheerful. "Anyway, Michelle already had plans. So did Mika. Maybe you can think of something for this weekend, huh?" On Friday afternoon, Rhonda waited for a call from Mike that he was on his way to pick up the children. Michelle complained that she had to walk. She has become friends with Caitlin Grady, the 13-year-old girl next door, and would rather spend time with her new friend than with her boring father. Mickey was just gloomy and silent. Every time Rhonda asked him what was wrong, Mickey would answer curtly, "Nothing." 6:30 passed, and still no call from Mike. At 7:30, Rhonda called Mike's phone and received a message that the number was no longer in service. Confused, she pressed the 3 button on her phone again. I received the same message again. "Are you ready?" John asked Rhonda, walking down the stairs in a dark suit. "Does it look like we're ready?" Rhonda answered. "Mike hasn't picked up the kids yet." "So call that damn idiot, will you?" John said sharply, his face distorted with anger. "John, great idea. Why didn't I think of it myself?" Rhonda answered sharply. "Oh yeah, wait, I already called and his number is offline." "Okay," John gloated. "This asshole is in a tough spot too, huh?" "Come on, guys. Rhonda sighed as she put on her high heels. Get your things. We'll drop you off at your father's. I was going to take the vet, John complained. John, customers will be inside, Rhonda said. They won't see the car. Let's go. We're late. John grumbled angrily, but took the keys to the Mercedes-Benz. Michelle got into the car angrily. Mickey climbed into the car gloomily and angrily. Oh my God, Rhonda sighed when she saw the sign that said Gold Standard Real Estate in front of Mike's house. Come on, they're already there, John ordered Michelle and Mickey. Come out, huh? John, they can't stay here. He's not home, Rhonda cried, seeing that there were no curtains in the windows. I'll be damned if we ruin this meeting because of your damn children, John hissed. John left a streak of tires when he pulled out of the driveway. While leaving the area, John had to brake suddenly to avoid colliding with a slow-moving car. John, the meeting isn't worth getting us all killed, is it? Rhonda screamed. On the 3rd, Rhonda received a check for $800. Checks arrived every 3rd day of the month, unless the 3rd day fell on a Sunday or holiday. Then the check arrived on the 2nd of the month. God, do I really have to? Mike heard Michelle sigh. He also heard a sullen, what? Why? From Mika. After finishing the conversation, Mike sat down at the table, and for the first time since the death of his mother, he cried. He lowered his head onto his folded hands and sobbed. 10 minutes, 10 hours later, he wasn't sure Mike stood up. Rising sluggishly, he looked around. Rhonda had already managed to remove everything from the house that had any monetary value. Only what had sentimental value remained. And Michelle and Micah's reaction to a simple request to spend time with him on his birthday erased much of the sentimental value of the remaining items. The consignment store happily accepted most of the furniture. They were even glad that Mike himself loaded everything into his F-250 and brought it to them. They politely declined the tattered old chair. For hygiene reasons, they also abandoned mattresses. Dolls, superhero figurines, roller skates, and figure skating skates. They are sure that they will quickly find their buyers. Just at this moment, the buyer was already looking at one of the boxes. Lyle Curtis let out some actual expletives when Mike told him he was leaving Rackwell Falls, leaving Colorado. The two men shared a manly hug, and several crew members also shook Mike's hand or hugged him. Where are you going to go? Several people asked, looking at the camper trailer attached to his truck. Probably south, Mike shrugged. I mean, it's summer, but damn, I'm tired of freezing in the winter, you know? Well, it's not like you use them, one of the men said, and Mike smiled and shook his head. Barbara Trenton quoted a reasonable fee and agreed to act as attorney for the sale of his home. A gold standard real estate agent had already toured the house and assured Mike that he could easily get $130,000, perhaps even $140,000 for it, despite the recent real estate crash. Since Mike paid for the house in full, the full sale price, minus the agent's commission, will go to his account. The real estate agent revised her estimates after Lyle Curtis sent a crew to repaint the entire house and replace the carpeting. We'll put it up for $160, she said enthusiastically as Mike answered his cell phone. Okay, Mike said, having no idea that Lyle did what he did. Mike Morrison received a divorce decree in Oak Leaf, Texas. To celebrate, Mike went to Tijuana Jack's and ordered a half-pound burger, extra spicy fries, and 2 ice-cold beers. He even got a lap dance for $50 from a naive red-haired girl with pneumatic breasts. Mike had no difficulty finding a job. Scandero Construction Company called Lyle Curtis. Lyle confirmed that Mike was not only as good as he claimed, he was even better. The pay was good, the work was stable, and the crew knew what they were doing. But the nights were long, working from 7 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, and sometimes until 4 if he had to meet a deadline. Mike was busy. But as soon as the boss announced the end of the day and everyone else went home, Mike again felt like he had no home. He lived in his travel trailer at an RV park. Mike started staying after work to clean up the site. He collected all the nails, scraps of boards, swept up sawdust and metal shavings. "Mike, workday's over," Joe Tonaschetti said quietly one afternoon. "Aha," Mike replied, continuing to sweep the concrete base. "My wife is having her famous beefcake with red sauce for dinner tonight. Why don't you come over?" Joe suggested. "Thanks, but I think—" Mike began. "Well, it would be a shame if you turned down Catherine Marie's cupcake," Joe insisted. "Just need to take a shower first," Mike said after a short pause. "Do that," Joe ordered. "I live at Wending 217 Ferguson Drive. Do you hear me?" "Okay," Mike agreed. The house was quite large among other large houses. The area reminded Mike of an area in Rackwell Falls, Colorado. He felt homesick again as he parked at the curb. Catherine Marie Tonaschetti was French-Canadian. While Joe was dark and thin, Catherine Marie was plump and pale. But there always seemed to be contact between them. They held hands, patted each other on the back, touched each other's thighs. Joe sat at the head of the table. Catherine Marie sat to his right. Their eldest daughter, a 20-year-old girl, sat to Joe's left. To the left of Antonetta Tony, Tonaschetti sat Joe's 15-year-old son, Joey. To Catherine Marie's right sat her 17-year-old daughter, Cheryl. Tony was almost identical to her mother, but Joey and Cheryl resembled Joey in many ways, although both were a little plumper. Dinner was a loud, rowdy affair. The only quiet moment was when Joe said a prayer. Mike learned that Joey played on the St. Peter and Paul High School football team. Cheryl was already a senior at Sacred Ascension and planned to attend the University of Louisiana at DeGard to study biosynthetic engineering. "It must have come from Mom, Mike," Joe said proudly. "Definitely not from the old man." "Tony, you're quiet today," Catherine Marie noted. "I'm, starting my last year of college, studying," Tony muttered, not looking up at her broccoli and cheese. "I came home from my first day of kindergarten and said, I'm going to be a teacher, and never thought about being anything else," Joe boasted. Mike thought about Michelle. She decided that she would be an Olympic skier until she found out that they didn't make much money and had to train every day. She then decided to become a doctor, but after a few weeks she realized that being a doctor was too difficult. The last Mike remembered, Michelle said she wanted to be a meteorologist. The weather girl on the local TV channel was beautiful but absent-minded. "You don't even need to know what you're doing. She just reads everything from the computer screen," Michelle claimed. "We need good teachers," Mike agreed. "Do you remember what made you decide to become a teacher?" Miss Davis was so beautiful and so smart." Tony finally looked up, smiling. "She talked about the whole world outside of Texas and—" "There's nothing outside of Texas, Tony," Joe interrupted. "I'm sorry to tell you this, but Miss Davis was lying. When I asked her how to become a teacher, she told me that I had to really want it, and I had to do well in school," Tony continued, slapping her father's hand. "Graduated with honors from Holy Ascension. She was on the list of the best students every semester," boasted Catherine Marie. "Do you have children, Mr. Mike?" Tony asked, staring at Mike with her clear green eyes. "I have had two," Mike said, losing his smile. Joey laughed. "Lost them somewhere?" Tony slapped her brother on the back of the head. "Hey," Joey was indignant. "Somehow," Mike replied. "Divorce." "Sorry," Joey muttered, embarrassed. After dinner, when the dishes had been cleared away, Mike yawned, then laughed and apologized. He thanked Catherine Marie for inviting her to her table, said goodnight to Tony, Joey, and Cheryl, then unexpectedly gave Joe a big hug. "I haven't sat like this for a long time," he said. "I haven't sat at such a family table for a long time." The next day, Joe showed no sign that Mike was his guest. He shouted commands, pointed, and spoke loudly, and at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he declared the end of the working day. Mike stayed and cleaned up the construction site. He was disappointed to find that Joe had not returned or invited him to join the family dinner again. At Tijuana Jack's, Mike ordered a juicy burger and an ice-cold beer. On Friday, Joe again shouted commands, pointed, and spoke loudly. At 2:30 in the afternoon, he distributed the salary. Tomorrow night, is Catherine Marie making this dish? Calling it jambalaya, Joe said after everyone else had left. What time do you want me to come? Mike asked. 6, Joe answered. But hey, what about tonight? Joey's playing. Why don't you come over? Mike sat on the hard benches and cheered and whistled for Saints Peter and Paul. St. Andrews outclassed the home team by a wide margin, but the game was spirited. Tony sat next to Mike during the game, wearing jean shorts and a Saints Peter and Paul football team t-shirt. She touched his hand, his arm, his thigh several times. Her plump legs often touched his leg. At 5 o'clock on Saturday evening, Mike went to Burns and Burns Supermarket and bought a nice strawberry cake. He then drove around, trying to kill time. Finally, he drove to a house on Ferguson Drive and parked in front of the house. Hi, Mr. Mike, Cheryl smiled as she opened the door. Dad, Mr. Mike is here. Are you going to make him stand on the street? Joe asked. Well, no, Cheryl said. Then get out of the way and let him come in, Joe joked to his daughter. Catherine Marie accepted the cake and complained that she didn't want the cake. She thanked him again as she put it in the refrigerator. But I really don't need to, said Catherine Marie, patting her small belly. Then don't eat, Joe suggested. Oh, but that would be so rude. He's our guest, and he brought us cake, and I won't eat it, Catherine Marie smiled. Aha, Joe smiled, hugging her from behind. Joe, we have a guest, Catherine Marie complained as Joe's hands rose under her heavy breasts. Mike, look away, will you? It'll only take a minute, Joe ordered. Joe, leave me alone, Catherine Marie squealed, then laughed. They always do that, Tony commented, rolling her eyes. That's what married people should do, Mike smiled. Tony's blush was very cute. The 20-year-old girl turned and left the kitchen. Where are you going? Dinner's almost ready, Joe called out to her. To my room, Tony answered. Would you like to set the table? Joe suggested. Hey, I can do that, Mike suggested. What? You're our guest, Joe countered. No, the first time I was a guest. The second time, I'm family, Mike said. So where are the plates? Tony returned after Mike opened the closet. Together they set the table. Then she picked up a handful of knives and forks. Mike quickly folded 6 paper napkins into squares, and she placed the cutlery on the napkins. I'll let you get the glasses and ice, Mike said. Hey, Mr. Mike, Joey said. Damn, we played like crap yesterday, huh? I thought you played well, Mike smiled. It's a pity that the other team came to win, huh? Hell yeah, Timmy Almont, their protector? Dude, Joey agreed. Mike learned that Catherine Marie's jambalaya was simply shredded chicken and pork sausage mixed with rice and simmered in a pan, covered with a can of chopped tomatoes and finely chopped onions and bell peppers. There was just enough cayenne pepper added for heat, and Mike tried not to overeat. Oh, did you bring dessert? Joey yelled when Catherine Marie mentioned strawberry cake. Yes, but I don't need it, Catherine Marie said again. Okay, more for me then, Joey stated. Son, you still have a lot to learn about women, Mike said, smiling. Sunday was a long day for Mike. He was never particularly religious, so he did not go to the service. He knew enough about football to follow it, but he wasn't a fan of any team, not even the Denver Broncos. He tried to sleep longer than usual, but soon gave up and got up. He didn't take a shower. I just put on shorts, a t-shirt and sneakers and walked out of my caravan. Some neighbors at the RV park waved hello to him. Others did not. Mike walked several miles until he came to Oxbow Lake. There he saw several other people who were of the same mind as him. They weren't in church. They weren't watching TV. They didn't want to sit indoors, alone with their thoughts. One young woman caught his attention. She was a stunning blonde whose skin was almost tan. She was lying on her back, her impressive breasts sticking up in her top. She looked around, eyes hidden behind sunglasses. But it was obvious that she was looking around to see if anyone was looking at her. The woman clearly wanted to have an audience, a crowd of admiring spectators. But no one paid attention to her. They were busy playing frisbee, playing with a beach ball, and working on their tanning. "That's how I feel too," Mike said as the attractive blonde looked visibly despondent. On Monday morning, Mike and Carlos finished the trim work. Now there was nothing to do while the painters applied primer, applied a layer of permanent white semi-gloss paint, and the electricians did the installation. Carlos shrugged as Mike picked up the broom and dustpan. "Hey, Morrison," Joe called out to him. "Yes," Mike answered. "My Tony wants to know if you're coming to dinner tonight," Joe spoke sternly, his face unfriendly. "I guess so," Mike answered, not understanding Joe's tone or expression. "Listen, she's only 20, you know?" Joe exploded. "She's half your age." Hey, no, Joe, I didn't do anything," Mike protested. Joe looked at him sternly. Then he turned and began shouting instructions to the workers who were slowly caulking the seams of the drywall. Come on, we need to paint these walls." "Huh?" he ordered. Mike shrugged, placed the broom and dustpan by the doorway, and left the construction site. The project was completed as far as his work was concerned. He could stay, do the cleaning, minor touch-ups, finishing touches before the business could move into the building. Or he could leave the job to Carlos and Carlos' cousin, Philip. Barbara Trenton looked at the receipts, typing quickly on her computer keyboard, and nodded her head. She then turned her attention to Rhonda. "So, half of," she began. Is there any way you can, contribute a little more?" Rhonda asked with hope in her voice. Barbara held back a sigh. Rhonda's voice irritated her. The lawyer looked closely at the attractive woman, then shook her head. "The divorce was pretty clear," Barbara said sharply. $400 a month for each minor child and half of the medical and educational expenses. "Yeah, but, the car broke down. We had to buy a new one, and—" Rhonda complained. "Mrs. Piercy," Barbara began. "This is Morrison," Rhonda interrupted sharply. Interesting," Barbara said. "Mrs. Morrison, your lack of planning is not my client's problem." "Where is your client?" "Huh?" Rhonda demanded. "Missed Michelle's birthday." "We sent her a card," Barbara said. "Send a $10 gift card for Benny's Burger Bar with it." Barbara's personal assistant brought the printed check, and Barbara signed the check. She slid the check towards Rhonda Piercy, or Morrison. Barbara then placed the receipts in a plastic store bag, which Rhonda used to carry the receipts into the office. "Thank you, Mrs. Piercy. I'm sorry, Mrs. Morrison," Barbara said, returning to her monitor. "So what about Michelle's braces?" Rhonda insisted. "Well, Michael A., Morrison S.R., paid his half for them. He paid his half for Michael A., Morrison Jr.'s football camp. He paid his half for the dental visits," Barbara continued. "Can you at least tell me how to contact him?" Rhonda asked. "No," Barbara answered coldly and turned back to her computer monitor. "Bitch, I hope one day you have kids of your own and have to deal with a bitch like you," Rhonda said. "I have 3 of my own. I raised them on my own after my husband left us, and it worked out for me," Barbara replied, continuing to type. "And you know what? When he came back after she had squeezed all the juice out of him, tried to come back with all the apologies and assurances that it wouldn't happen again." "Hello?" Mike answered on his cell phone. "Now, Catherine Marie is asking if you're coming to dinner," Joe's voice said sharply. "There will be chicken caxiator, or what she thinks is chicken caxiator. It's not at all what my mother cooked, that's for sure." I don't think that," Mike began. "If you don't come, I'm done for," Joe said. At 6 o'clock, do you hear? Mike pulled up to the house, being careful not to block the driveway with his RV. Tony opened the door, smiling at him. Then she saw a shiny trailer behind Mike. Her green eyes opened wide. Are you going camping? She asked with a smile. No, I'm leaving, Mike admitted. Tony jerked her head and looked at Mike's serious face. Her eyes filled with tears, and she rushed into the dark interior of the house. What the... Catherine Marie, what's wrong with her? Joe demanded. Come in, Mike. It's cold outside, huh? Catherine Marie greeted Mike with a smile. Joey had already set the table, and Cheryl was getting glasses. Tony, all is ready, Catherine Marie shouted as she spilled the food. Tony, Catherine Marie demanded a moment later as she sat down at the table. Antoinette Catherine Marie Tonaschetti, Catherine Marie shouted, standing up. When she uses your full name, you know there's trouble, Joey told Mike. Then don't tell her my full name, Mike joked. I'll go get her, Cheryl suggested. Joe, say a prayer, I'll go get her, Catherine Marie ordered. The four people hesitated. When Joe started eating, Cheryl, Joey, and Mike started eating too. A moment later, two curvaceous, beautiful blondes with reddened eyes entered the kitchen. So, Mike, why are you leaving? Catherine Marie demanded. Job done, right? Mike muttered as Joe's head shot up from his plate. We just started this today, Joe said. But my job is done, Mike pointed out. The frame is ready. Yeah, but we start working on the Great Oak National Bank on Monday next week, Joe countered. Michael, please stay, Tony whispered, looking pleadingly at her plate. She turned her head. Her green eyes were full of tears. She whispered, please, and then looked back at her plate. Rhonda Morrison surveyed Roberts Drive. The homes in this area of Texas town were gorgeous. 18, 9, Rhonda muttered as she stopped her rental car in front of the red brick house. Yeah, Rhonda grinned when she saw the shiny mobile home outside the house. When Mike bought this monstrosity, she demanded that he pour a concrete pad for it. She didn't want the grass underneath it to die or for weeds to grow around it, a thing they never intended to use. He stood on a concrete pad next to a large garage. Rhonda looked at the neatly trimmed lawn, at the fresh flowers in the cute wooden cart in the center of the yard, at the cheerful flowers along the path from the driveway to the front door. She actually chuckled at the flowers. Mike never cared about such things. He said more than once that flowers are nothing more than desirable weeds. Gathering her courage, Rhonda walked to the front door and pressed the glowing button. Yes, a faceless female voice was heard. Rhonda looked at the small speaker and saw that she was on camera. A small lens sat on top of a metal grill. Hi, me, Mike. Mike Morrison lives here, Rhonda said lamely. And who are you? Asked a female voice. The voice was not unfriendly. The voice was not friendly either. Rhonda started to get nervous. This is not what she imagined in her mind. She splurged on her travel outfit. The jersey material hugged her 36D breasts. The push-up bra supported her well. The same tight material unfortunately accentuated her midriff, but she was 39 years old. There's nothing you can do about it. The jeans hugged her butt well. There were a few extra pounds on my butt, hips and thighs. Her backside was a little wider than she would have liked, but the jeans still shaped her flesh into a more flattering shape. Now, standing on the porch of his house, under the hot Texas sun, the jeans were soaked with sweat and began to chafe her curvy hips, her jutting waist. The blouse clung to her more than it hugged her. I'm Rhonda. Rhonda Morrison, his wife. His ex-wife, Rhonda said. Exclaimed the voice. He doesn't. Does he know you? Did he know you were coming? No, Rhonda admitted. She stood there for a few moments. Just as she was about to ring the bell again, the door opened. It wasn't fair. 7.5 years later, he shouldn't have looked even better than when she left him. But he really looked good, better. His blonde hair had streaks of silver. His face was tanned by the sun. His chest and arms were muscular in a tank top. He was wearing swimming trunks, and his legs were thick, muscular, and his waist seemed slender. "Yes?" he demanded. "Hey, Mike," Rhonda said, then grinned. "Long time no see." "Yes?" Mike demanded again. Mike, can we talk somewhere?" Rhonda stammered. "It'll do just fine here," Mike said. "Michael," the beautiful young blonde said tenderly. Rhonda looked from Mike's serious face to the blonde. The young woman had long blonde hair, beautiful green eyes, and a soft expression. Mike and whoever this woman was were most likely swimming. Her arms were slender, her legs smooth, and her cape protruded strongly from her chest. "Michael, go to the sunroom," the young woman said, her voice soft but rich in her Texas accent. "Honey, I don't want her in my house," Mike said, his voice hard. "Michael," said the wifeshina, peering into his brown eyes. 5 minutes. "Fine. Come on," Mike ordered Rhonda. The woman rushed to what Rhonda assumed was the sunroom, then opened the atrium doors and stepped outside. Through a large glass window, Rhonda could see a large swimming pool in which there was a Hispanic girl, a young girl, and 2 boys. Rhonda watched as the blonde took off her cape and stepped into the pool. Her mouth dropped open at the sight of the blonde's breasts. 5 minutes. "Let's go, Rhonda. Let's start talking," Mike ordered, drawing Rhonda's attention away from the attractive blonde who was now sitting on the steps playing with 3 children. "Really?" Rhonda spat bitterly. "We've been together for 14 years. Can't you be a little kinder to me?" "Oh, sorry. Would you like a glass of champagne? Some caviar? Lord, where are my manners?" Mike snapped sarcastically. "Come on, Rhonda. Came all the way here. Let's get this done." I don't know if you heard, but Michelle is getting married next month." "On the 9th, Rhonda said. "Yes? How far has she come?" Mike asked. Rhonda blushed at Mike's harsh question. She looked back at the pool. 4.5 months, she finally admitted. Was Mike's response. She would really. It would mean so much if her dad walked her down the aisle," Rhonda said. "God, should I really?" Mike spat bitterly. "Well, she would really." Rhonda trailed off, taken aback by his statement. "I wanted to go to Benny's Burger Bar," Mike explained his snark. "Hey, it's my birthday. I wanted to spend some time with my kids. And what do I hear? God, I must. So no, Rhonda, I will not walk Michelle down the aisle. Tell her to let John Piercy do it, okay? What else do you have?" John Piercy is no longer a part of our lives," Rhonda snapped, her beautiful face becoming distorted and ugly. Mike replied. Mike turned just in time to see the little girl boldly jump from the diving board into the pool. He smiled as the 2 women applauded the girl's achievement. The girl swam from the deep end of the pool to the stairs. Before either woman could stop the little girl, she ran towards the atrium doors. "Dad, did you see me?" the girl screamed, dripping everywhere. "Yes, I saw you. You jumped off the board right into the deep end like a big girl," Mike said as he picked up the wet girl and hugged her. "I'm Audrey. I'm 4 years old," the girl told Rhonda. "Hi," Rhonda said. "Michael, I'm sorry. She ran in here before I could stop her," the blonde said as she entered the room. "My mom is a teacher," Audrey said proudly. "Oh," said Rhonda. "Precious, it's okay. She didn't disturb anything." Mike smiled and squeezed his daughter tightly. "Come on, love. Show mommy that big old jump again, okay?" the woman persuaded. "Daddy, you need to watch," Audrey demanded. "Like I'll ever be able to take my eyes off you." Mike smiled and squeezed it again. "So why can't Mickey walk his sister down the aisle?" Mike asked as he watched Audrey step back onto the diving board. Rhonda stammered. I mean, I know he left the treatment center. How crappy is your insurance? Didn't pay a penny for his CDU? Mike asked, smiling as Audrey jumped back into the water. What kind of insurance? Rhonda spat bitterly. Because I know. I paid $28,000 the first time, and that was only my half. I paid $31,000 the second time, and this one was how much? $38,500, my half, Mike said. Rhonda looked pointedly around the sunroom, the rattan furniture, the Spanish tiles, and the large backyard with a swimming pool. Stop sending him to elite clubs, Mike demanded. Frankie boy got clean and stayed sober in a charity ward, and he hasn't drunk for 9 years. Rhonda looked at Mike angrily. He clearly didn't know about the guilt she'd been carrying with her for the past 4 years. Rhonda Piercy returned home when the mean girl at her spinning class told her the payment hadn't arrived. Rhonda knew she had entered all the information, knew she had clicked send, and received confirmation from the online banking site that the payment had been sent. Rhonda angrily walked up the stairs to complain to John. Entering their bedroom, Rhonda saw John and her 13-year-old son in the bedroom. Mickey told police that this had been going on since the second night they moved in with John. Mickey also revealed that John told him that Rhonda knew everything. Shortly after the discovery, shortly after John's arrest, shortly after the divorce, Mickey began skipping school, staying late, coming home bleary-eyed and smelling of alcohol. The first treatment center was after Rhonda returned home to a pitiful 2-bedroom apartment and found Mickey unconscious, with a needle still in his arm. Her job at Myra Boutique was strictly on commission against a base. She couldn't afford insurance, rent, utilities, or groceries. 3 years later, she was still paying her portion of the bill for that treatment center. Mickey is in jail, Rhonda admitted. I wonder if I still have to pay you child support if he's in jail, Mike said thoughtfully as he watched his wife, maid, and 3 children dry themselves off with a towel. He's still a minor, Rhonda responded sharply. Yeah, but he's not under your care, right? Mike said, getting to his feet. 5 minutes have passed. Rhonda, goodbye. Is it true? Is it true? I've flown so far. I'm begging you to be a part of your daughter's wedding. And you're just going to ruin everything, Rhonda screamed. Did I ask you to come here? Mike asked. No, Michelle asked, Rhonda replied sharply. Then maybe Michelle should have come, Mike said, and opened the sunroom door. Hey, are you guys soaking wet yet? My fingers are all wrinkled, Audrey announced. Oh, this is terrible, Mike said. Well, you seem to have settled in pretty well, Rhonda quipped, looking at Mike. Yes, and thank you for that, Mike chuckled. Mike walked Rhonda to the front door of the house. Neither of them said a word until he closed the heavy door behind her. As she walked from the door to the car, Rhonda again felt sweat beginning to form around her waist, under her arms. Inside the house, Mike walked into the kitchen, where there was slight chaos. His wife and their maid were trying to figure out what the children wanted for dinner. Snot and fingers, Mike suggested. Don't start with them, the blonde smiled. Dad, I want hot dogs, Russell said. Yes, hot dogs, supported his twin brother Bertrand. Wait a minute, the housekeeper Carmen laughed. I thought you said you wanted hamburgers. I changed my mind, the boy said. How about spaghetti? With chopped hot dogs, Mike suggested. Yes, the 3 children agreed. Dad, you're the best, his wife smiled as she pulled out a pasta pan. After dinner, after a bath, although Russell and then Bertrand claimed that they had already taken a dip in the pool and that should have counted as a bath, after praying and reading bedtime stories, Mike went into his bedroom. Hey, honey, Mike said as his wife came out of the closet, wearing a simple t-shirt. So what did your ex-wife want? She asked, kissing him. Lots of protein, she smiled and climbed onto the bed. Well, come on, actually. What did she want? I wanted me to walk our daughter down the aisle. Michelle is getting married next month. The ninth, Mike said, getting into bed next to her. So, are we going to Rackwell Falls? She asked, smiling happily. Is it snowing there already? In August? No, precious, despite what you Southerners may think. Colorado is a long way from the North Pole. Mike smiled. And no, we do not go. Do you think you'll go there alone? This isn't happening, she snapped. I won't go, Mike said. Michael, your daughter? You're not going to take her for a walk, she muttered. She laid her fair head on his chest. Her fingers gently rubbed his muscular chest. He hugged her with his right hand. Baby, I know what happened. I know it hurts, but, she whispered. She raised her head, her green eyes peering into his. He wanted to kiss her, but she retreated. Mike remembered the first time he saw her. She was a beautiful girl then. 6, almost 7 years later, she was still beautiful. He and Tony went on a few dates. The girl was beautiful, and her body was pleasantly plump. She was smart, thoughtful, energetic, and funny. He cared about her a lot. But there was just no spark, no real chemistry. The sex was amazing, exhausting. But again, there was no real connection other than two lonely people using each other. Fortunately, it was Tony who revealed the bitter truth. Michael, she said as they walked through Kennedy Park along Oxbow Lake. Yeah, he asked, watching a woman with one of those ankle-biting dogs. The woman had a nice, toned-looking ass. She was wearing boy shorts, strutting and showing off her tight ass. The Yorkie was on a retractable leash. Mike was fascinated as he watched the dog scamper around, the leash going in and out of the woman's clumsy little hand. Michael, I love you, Tony said. Mike felt his insides churn. He knew that he was not in love with the girl. He cared about her, but not enough to see a real future with her. But I just don't love you, she admitted. I feel that way too, Mike admitted. I mean, oh my God, I care about you so much, but do I see any long-term romance going on here? Probably not. Oh, said Tony. But I know we will always be friends, Mike said. I mean, I know I owe you something. You kept me from just running away just because things got a little rough. She smiled at him. He wrapped his arms around her plump body and squeezed her. Let's take you home, okay? He said. At this moment, the Yorkie began to yelp and squeal. The woman shouted the animal's name. Mike looked back and saw a small dog lunging at the runner. The runner apparently did not see the retractable fishing line, the dog leash, because the runner suddenly found himself wrapped in a thin and strong fishing line. The runner fell hard. The dog began squealing and squealing as it became trapped under the runner's prone body. The woman started screaming at the unlucky runner. Mike ran up and carefully helped the runner. He then grabbed the snarling 6-pound dog, unhooked the leash, and pushed the annoying dog into the annoying dog owner. Hold your damn animal and leave the stupid leash, Mike ordered. He managed to free the rope. All this time, the runner did not move. Mike could see a swollen knot on the woman's forehead. He could also see the woman's ankle was broken. Concussion, broken leg, Mike said. Tony, get her name and address. I won't let you, the woman shrieked. Mike pulled out his cell phone, took 2 photos of the woman, and then called 911. Yeah, there's a runner here, broken ankle, looks like a concussion. A woman's dog tripped her, which is why. My Dawson didn't trip over it. She just fell, the woman objected loudly. Lady, please, Mike snorted. Okay, sir, I can call an ambulance. It will take about 40 minutes, the operator informed. She's unconscious, Mike countered. Sorry, sir, the nearest vehicle is in Wakulla, the operator said. Okay, I'll take her myself, Mike said sharply. He picked up the young woman and carried her to his truck. Tony followed him, glaring angrily at the woman and her dog. The woman hurriedly left. Don't worry, I have a photo of her. She'll be back, Mike told Tony as he buckled the woman into the truck. Tony ran and got a glass of ice from the vendor, and Mike gave Tony his handkerchief. Tony sat in the seat behind the young woman and held a makeshift ice pack on her head as Mike drove quickly, hazard lights on, to Luffridge Hospital. The woman moaned lightly several times, but was still unconscious when Mike stopped abruptly at the emergency room. The nurse and orderly came out, quickly pushing the gurney. Mike told them what happened as they loaded the young woman onto the gurney. He then drove Tony home. They hugged again. Tony then wiped a tear from her eye and walked into her parents' house. Mike hesitated, wondering if he should go back to the hospital or just go home. The late hour made the decision for him. Tomorrow he had a full day of work, working for Scandaro during the day and working on his latest acquisition in the evening. The evening they ate chicken caxiator. The evening Tony begged Mike to stay. He decided he needed to find a more permanent place to live than his mobile home. While Mike was waiting for Scandaro Construction to complete the Adams office space and begin work on the First National Bank of Great Oak, he came across a foreclosure property in a modest area and purchased the property. The previous owners left food to rot, smeared feces on the walls, broke all the windows and poured dry concrete into the toilets. Mike did most of the work himself, using his position at Scandaro to get materials at a good price. While he was working on this house, the house next door was also repossessed. Mike bought it too. Then 2 houses on Roberts Drive, in a gated community, also came under foreclosure. Owners overextended their loans and used their homes as collateral. The market collapse took them by surprise. Mike was able to sell 3 of the 4 properties for a reasonable profit. He decided to move to the 4th house, 1809 Roberts Drive. He worked for Scandaro Construction during the day and evenings and weekends for Morrison Renovation and Reconstruction. His latest project was in the same gated community, on Simpson Way. The story was the same. The owner overspent on a speculation that didn't pan out and lost the house. The man's last act was to commit suicide in the house. This was the first hint to his trophy wife that something was wrong in her idyllic life. Nora Sanford first emptied her husband's wall safe, taking all of her jewelry. She also made sure she had the keys to 3 safes, then called 911 to report Jack's suicide. The next morning, as soon as Jack Sanford's bank opened, Nora emptied 3 safe deposit boxes and disappeared. The bank slowly but surely repossessed all the other assets but confiscated them. The house was the family's last asset, and Mike purchased it for 1/5 of its appraised value. The only thing he really needed to do was replace the carpets and paint. Either Jack or, most likely, Nora had very bright, very vulgar tastes in colors and color combinations. The electric blue carpet and the crimson carpet were the first to be pulled out. It took 3 coats of primer to cover the gold enamel on the bathroom walls. But after Joe called it a day, Mike found himself on his way not to the Simpson Way site, but to Luffridge. He parked and walked into the hospital, then realized he didn't even know the young woman's name. The nurse typed something on the keyboard, looked at Mike, at his driver's license, then back at him. "It's a long way to go, huh?" she asked. "Oh, I just moved to Oakleaf a couple of months ago," Mike admitted. "I'll see if she can have a visitor," the nurse said and quickly left. A few minutes later, the nurse returned, smiling widely. She led Mike to the elevator on the 4th floor, south wing. "To the left when you get out of the elevator," she pointed. "They cut my shoes to take them off," was the first thing the woman said when Mike entered the room. "I guess none of them knew how to untie the knot. When I brought you here, that was the first question I asked them," Mike smiled, looking into her clear green eyes. "They weren't sure, but they thought maybe there was a doctor who knew how to untie the knots." "Tell me what happened?" "I just ran, and then—" "Nothing," the woman said. "The woman had one of those dogs on one of those stupid stretch leashes," Mike said, sitting down in a chair. "You were walking by, and Frou-Frou, or Tiny, or whatever the name of this little bitch was, rushed at you. You got confused and fell. looking at the blonde as they talked. Mike couldn't shake the feeling that he had seen her before. He even mentioned it. She looked at his face carefully, then shook her head. "I went to Connolly," she offered. "Yeah? What did you study?" he asked. "Education. I want to become a teacher," she said. "Maybe I saw you there. I picked Tony up a couple of times," Mike shrugged. "By the way, do you have a name?" she asked. About Mike. Mike Morrison," he said. "Precious Cruz," she said. Yeah, I know. I don't look Mexican." "So, Precious, who do you want to call?" he insisted, and her beautiful face darkened. No, she stammered, looking away. "Mother? Father?" he insisted. "Mom died last year, ovarian cancer," she said. "Dad said, 'You're not my daughter. Either have sex or leave,'" Precious said. "Oh," Mike said. He looked at his watch and decided that he still had 2 hours of daylight left to work. He told Precious he would be back and stood up. She smiled sadly and lowered the bed. Even in her shapeless hospital gown, when she lay down, Mike could see her large breasts sticking out, and he remembered where he had seen her before. "Oxbow Lake," he said. "What?" Precious asked, stopping the movement of the bed. "That's where I saw you before. On the beach at Oxbow Lake," Mike explained. No, you were there, sunbathing," Mike said. "Beautiful girl in a beautiful green bikini, but she looked as sad as I felt at the time." "Why were you sad?" Precious asked. Mike sat down again. Precious lifted the bed and looked at him. "I, was happily married. I had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. I wanted to name him Russell, after my old man. God, my old man was great, you know," Mike said. "Or Bertrand. It was the name of my maternal grandfather. Give him a piece of wood, he'll take out his pocket knife, and in a minute you'll have your car. Either a frog or a boat." "So what did you call him?" Precious asked quietly, taking his hand in hers. "Rhonda, it was my wife. Rhonda decided to name him Mike Jr. Called him Mickey," Mike said. "It's a good name," Precious smiled. "I like this name." Yeah, that's a pretty good name, I guess. I was named after my dad's brother. Killed in Vietnam," Mike agreed. "What about your little girl?" Precious asked. "Audrey," Mike said. I love this name," Precious admired. "HM? Oh, yeah, that was my mom's name, Audrey Nicole McAllister Morrison," Mike said. But again, Rhonda decided otherwise. Michelle Christina Morrison. She said it was nice. Michael and Michelle. "Do you see them often?" she asked. "It's been a few months," Mike admitted. "They're in Rackwell Falls. They have a pool and a boogie board. Why do they need a dad, huh?" Mike stayed until the orderly brought dinner to her room. Mike surprised them both when he leaned down and kissed Precious softly on the lips. The next morning, Mike was finishing up the main load-bearing wall in the main lobby of the bank. His phone rang in his pocket, playing the tune of Atik's Back in Black. "Michael?" a soft voice asked quietly. "Uh-huh," Mike agreed, wiping sweat from his brow. It was a little after 10 in the morning, and the Texas sun was already blazing. Mike walked over to the cooler and picked up a paper cup. "Michael, I'm being discharged today," Precious said. "Will they even feed you lunch?" Mike asked, looking around the construction site for Joe. "No, they already took me out into the corridor," she admitted. "Oh my gosh, really?" Mike sighed. "I'll come as soon as I can." Joe shrugged when Mike told him he had a little emergency. At the hospital, an orderly wheeled Precious to the curb. Mike picked the girl up and placed her in his truck, then helped her buckle up. "Okay, where should I take you?" he asked. "Home," she said. She gave him directions to the Spanish Arms apartments. Then she remembered. Her car was still parked in Kennedy Park. Mike brushed off her apology and drove to Kennedy Park. She pointed at her 2005 Volkswagen Beetle and punched him in the arm as he mocked the small car. "Shut up. He is cute," she defended, laughing. He made a sound like a wasp buzzing as he parked next to the car. He then walked around and helped her out of the truck. This thing isn't mechanical, is it?" Mike asked. "Sure," said Precious. Mike looked at the cast on her leg. She looked down, realizing that driving the car would be extremely difficult for her. "Okay, your apartment is nearby. I'll take you and then come back for the car," Mike decided. "Oh, Michael, that's too much," Precious countered. "Precious, you can't drive like that," Mike said, "and we can't leave her here." Driving back to the Spanish Arms, Mike saw a new problem. Precious lived on the 3rd floor. "Precious, damn, they didn't give you crutches?" Mike asked. "What?" "No, they didn't," Precious realized. "Honey, how are you going to get up and down these stairs?" Mike asked. "I don't know," Precious said and burst into tears. "Okay, go ahead, get your keys," Mike ordered. He picked her up and carried her to the 3rd floor of her apartment. Then he left her in a stuffy, hot apartment. He went to Burns & Burns supermarket and bought several boxes. What are these boxes?" Precious asked as she struggled to the door and opened it for Mike. "Get some clothes, a toothbrush, everything you need for a couple of weeks," Mike ordered. "You'll live with me, at least until you can move on your own." Precious was about to object. Then she thought for a minute. Just jumping from the couch to the door was hard. How was she going to jump from the couch or bed to the door, go outside, and go down to the 1st floor of the building? "I assume your apartment is on the 1st floor," she asked as he carried the boxes into her bedroom. "Yours will be," Mike assured her, looking around the neat, orderly bedroom. "Listen, give me the keys to your bug and I'll be back, okay?" "About?" Precious jokes. "Would you like to help me pack my things?" "No, I've seen enough women's panties to last me a lifetime," Mike smiled. He surprised Precious again by leaning down and kissing her on the lips. Then he left the apartment. Mike went to a gas station and rented a tow bar and cable. He then drove to the park and attached the tow bar to the front of the car. "Incredible," Mike smiled as he drove away. The truck acted like it didn't feel anything. The truck was dragging the small car as if it wasn't there at all. "Okay, I think I'm ready," Precious said. "Okay," Mike said and picked her up. He carried her to the truck. He then ran up the stairs and took the boxes. "That's it. Anything else?" he asked before picking her up to put her in the truck. "No," she smiled, and then surprised him with a kiss right on the lips. "Thank you, Michael." "Thanks," Mike smiled and ran upstairs to make sure the apartment was securely locked. "So, he said that my apartment is on the 1st floor. How many apartments do you have?" Precious began. "Yeah, well, your bedroom will be on the 1st floor," Mike replied as he turned onto Robert's Drive. "Oh my God, I drove through here on Christmas," Precious exclaimed, looking around the wealthy area. "At Christmas?" Mike asked. "Yes, many of these houses, they work really hard with the Christmas lights," Precious explained. "How's Clark Griswold?" Mike asked. "Who?" Precious asked. "Griswold, Christmas holidays," Mike clarified. She shook her head and then stared as he stopped in front of his house. She was still trying to look through the 3rd floor windows, throwing her head back as he helped her out of the truck. "There are 5 windows up there. You need something in every window," Precious said. "HM?" Mike asked as he closed the truck door. "When you make the Christmas lights, we need something in every window," Precious said, holding out her arms, ready for him to lift her up again. He ran and opened the door of the house. Then he returned and picked her up in his arms. "Oh, carry me over the threshold," she joked. "Precious, when I carry you over the threshold, I would hope that you would at least have a nice dress, definitely better shoes," Mike smiled. "What's wrong with fiberglass?" Precious asked, swinging the heavy cast. "All the models wear it." Add ugh to ugly," Mike stated and laid her down on the couch. "Oh, I love this couch," Precious said. Is this where I will live? No, I'll take you to the bedroom as soon as I get your things, Mike said. Mike quickly carried her things into the house. Then he picked her up from the couch and carried her to her bedroom. Yes, you're a man, Precious jokes, looking around at the austere furniture. Mike laughed as he laid her down on the bed. She didn't let him go when he tried to straighten up. Thank you, Michael, she said quietly and kissed him on the lips. Welcome, Mike said. Oh, do you want to use the bathroom? It's right across the hall. Are you reading minds? Or have my eyes started to turn yellow? Precious said. Mike picked her up and carried her into the small, simple bathroom. She smiled as he sat her down on the toilet, then quickly left the room and closed the door tightly. Scream when you're done, he shouted through the door. Mike found a few more pillows around the house and dragged an old TV and tube into the room. He then made her some canned soup and used an old, slightly rusty pan as a tray. Then he went to the rental agency and rented aluminum crutches for Precious. Thus began 5 weeks of living together. The first few mornings, Precious complained slightly about being woken up before sunrise for breakfast. On the third morning, Mike found Precious waiting for him, arms wide open, waiting for him to carry her into the kitchen. You have crutches, Mike said on the fourth morning as he picked her up. But I like it when you carry me, she whispered in his ear. As she whispered in his ear, Mike smelled her toothpaste. He realized that Precious had woken up, crawled across the hallway to her bathroom, brushed her teeth, and then crawled back into the bedroom and waited for him. He smiled at her, and she smiled back. Honestly, he said, I like it when I carry you too. Joe complained when Mike had to leave for Precious's doctor's appointments. He also complained when Mike had to leave to take Precious to physical therapy. Teresa White, a lawyer who was recommended to Mike by one of his colleagues, helped Precious sue Mary Bookhammer, the owner of Dawson's Yorkie, who tripped Precious. But that took time away from Scandero's latest project to visit Teresa White's office. Hey, Mike, we all have other things to do. Can you schedule it for after work? Joe complained the next time Mike asked him for an early afternoon. Everything away from Luffridge, Mike tried to explain. Decide what is more important, work or what this crap is, Joe said sharply. Mike didn't answer, nor did he remind Joe of the early afternoon. The next morning, Joe yelled at Mike in front of other workers. Mike smiled, nodded, and left the construction site. Hey, you're home early, Precious said as she looked at him from behind her textbook. Yeah, muttered Mike. Oh, I don't have an appointment, right? Precious asked, concerned. Huh? No, I got kicked out of work, Mike said. Oh, Michael, what happened? Precious asked, patting the pillow next to her. Mike sat down next to her on the couch and told her. He talked about a little animosity that arose when he was dating Joe's daughter, the girl he was with the night Precious was injured. The animosity persisted, although Mike never saw Tony again. But this was exacerbated by Mike's frequent need to leave work. Oh, Michael. Oh, honey, why didn't you say anything? I could have asked one of my friends to drive me, Precious complained. But I wanted to take you, Mike admitted. Why? Precious asked, looking into his brown eyes. Mike hesitated. Michael, I'm not going to say it first. I need to hear it from you, Precious admitted, taking his large hand in her small ones. Say it, she whispered hoarsely, her face a few millimeters from his. Because I'm in love with you, he admitted. And I'm in love with you, Michael Arthur Morrison, Precious whispered, then kissed Michael on the lips. Now out of work, Mike began buying houses that had been damaged by the recent real estate crisis, making the necessary repairs and renovations, and continuing to make money. The benefit of being his own boss was that he had the time and ability to drive Precious to doctor's appointments, physical therapy, and short outings and excursions. On one of these excursions, at the Hog's Head restaurant, which Precious loved, Mike learned his true status. Hey, Presh, the young muscular guy said with a slightly mocking tone. HM, oh, hi, Barry, Precious responded, in a voice without much emotion. So this is your dad, Barry said as he tried to sit next to Precious on the bench. Precious stopped Barry from taking his seat with her hand. No, this is my fiancé, Michael Morrison. Michael, this is Barry. We met before, Precious introduced him. Who's yours? Barry laughed mockingly. My fiancé. See, Barry. Oh, hey, Allison. What's up, girl? See, I get it. There's a huge difference between men and boys. Precious smiled sweetly. Hey, Precious, Barry, the ribs are here, right? Allison said. Barry glared at Mike, slammed his hip into the table, and turned, walking away to another table. Your fiancé? Mike asked as the waitress brought them plates of brisket. Oh, you didn't know? Precious smiled. She squeezed some Texas heat sauce onto her brisket. This was followed by a generous layer of Texas sweet sauce. She stirred the two sauces with her index finger, then held out her finger, dripping with sauce, to him. You want to get married after Christmas, do you hear? She asked. That gives me about a month to find the perfect ring, Mike agreed. Precious smiled solemnly. She smiled even wider as Mike squirted two sauces onto his plate of brisket. Give me time to remove this device. Can you dance the Texas two-step? Precious asked. And give me time to take some dance lessons, Mike replied. Brandon Wright of the non-denominational community church in Sweet Oak, Texas, officiated. The handsome man was cheerful, loud, and joyful as he performed the ceremony. His love for God, his love for the Word of God, his love for preaching were never in doubt. Mike learned to dance the Texas two-step and the Texas swing. The community hall next to the church echoed with cheers and applause as a DJ kept the dancers on the floor. The Hog's Head BBQ provided the food, and the guests, although suffering from overeating, had big smiles as they enjoyed the feast. Tony Tonaschetti congratulated Michael, congratulated Precious, and then locked herself in a stall in the women's restroom and sobbed. Emmanuel Wright, Brandon's 23-year-old son, stood at the closet door. When Tony finally came out, a handsome young man offered her a handkerchief. Sometimes, seeing other people's happiness can be a little hard, he said quietly. Tony didn't say anything, just dabbed at her tears with a soft cloth. When will my cousin Amelia get married? I wanted to hit the guy she married, the young man admitted. Yes? Tony smiled slightly. Yes, but Dad and common sense intervened, Emmanuel smiled. That guy was a nose guard for the Cougars from Connolly. Ah, Tony agreed. You know what? I haven't seen you on the dance floor yet, Emmanuel said. Your legs aren't broken, right? No, Tony giggled now. Then what are you waiting for? Let's go, Emmanuel said and grabbed her hand. 9 months and 2 days after Reverend Brandon Wright declared them husband and wife, Michael Morrison was back in Luffridge Hospital giving birth to Precious. Precious sobbed, screamed, moaned, choked, and cried during her 5-hour labor. Between sighs, moans, and other sounds, she held Michael's hand and declared her undying love for him, her knight in shining armor. 17 months later, Tony Wright and her husband Emmanuel Wright were a stone's throw away, giving birth to their first child at the same time Precious was giving birth to their daughter, Audrey Ann Morrison. I can't believe it, Mike muttered as they stepped off the plane in Benhurst, Colorado. New Texas would finally get tired of your ugly face, declared Lyle Curtis, Mike's former boss, hugging him. Hey, how are you? Mike laughed happily, hugging Lyle. What are you doing here? How are you doing? Less hair, more belly, still the same, Lyle laughed. I'm fine. Lyle Curtis, I want you to meet my family. Honey, I'm sure whatever incriminating material he has on you is past the statute of limitations, huh? Lyle joked when he met Precious Morrison. Eh? Precious asked. He thinks I'm blackmailing you, Mike explained. Really? Bertrand and Russell. I knew them, Lyle said, shaking the twins' hands. I'm Audrey. I'm 4 years old, Audrey said. extending her hand to the large man. And I'm not afraid of anything, Mike added. Now I know you booked a suite at the Hilton. Lizzie, my daughter is the manager there, Lyle said as the family picked up their 3 suitcases from the carousel. But you will stay at my house, do you hear? Mr. Curtis, are you sure? Precious asked. Mr. Curtis? Mr. Curtis, asked Lyle. Precious, by the way, what's your real name? It's kind of weird to call someone else's wife darling. Call me Lyle, do you hear? That's my name, Precious said, not offended. Oh, well, that suits you, Lyle said. As the family settled down, Mike and Precious in the guest room, Audrey in daughter Lyle's old room, and the twins on the pull-out couch in the man cave, Mike took a deep breath. I'll go check on the boys, Precious said. What? They just... Mike began, taking his cell phone out of his shirt pocket. I'll give you some privacy, Precious said quietly, then kissed him. Love you, Mike said. This is your daughter, Michael. First of all, she is your daughter. She is a part of you, Precious advised, then left the bedroom. Hello? Answered a girlish voice, sounding wary. Mike's guts, which were already quite tense, suddenly spasmed. He almost hung up. Hey, hi, it's your dad, Mike said. Who? Michelle said. Oh, Dad? Yeah. Listen, I'm in town. Planning to take Planning to take the wife and kids to Benny's Burger Bar. They've all heard of 1,000 ways to cook your burger, so that's where we're headed. Around 6. Would love to see you there, Mike said. Yes, of course, Michelle said, her voice sounding mocking. It's like I have 1,000 of these stupid gift cards. Great, Mike said and hung up. Precious looked up from the video game Bertrand and Russell were playing when Mike entered the room. She tilted her head to the side, looking at his grim expression. Benny's Burger Bar, 6 o'clock, Mike said. And? Precious asked in a quiet voice. And she sounded like a stuck-up little bitch, just like she did when she was 13, Mike blurted out. You know, every time I expect to get my ass kicked, I'm rarely disappointed, Precious said. My second graders, some of them are just the sweetest kids, and some of them, I swear to God. But when I let go of all the expectations, it usually goes so much better. I don't know why I let you talk me into this, Mike said and smiled when Bertrand found the pot of gold. Because I promised you something interesting, that's why, Precious whispered in his ear. That's right, Mike agreed. But not here, Precious laughed as Mike grabbed her slim waist and began caressing her buttocks. At exactly 6 o'clock, Mike drove Audrey and Russell to the restaurant. Precious and Bertrand followed them. Bertrand noticed the Porsche 911 and wanted to take a closer look at the shiny black car. Looking around, Mike felt a wave of disappointment, then a wave of anger. Michelle was nowhere to be seen. She is here? Precious asked quietly, taking Mike's hand. No, Mike answered sharply. Maybe she's stuck in traffic, Precious suggested. Honey, have you seen any traffic jams on the street? Mike asked, his voice hard. Ruckle Falls has to import traffic jams if they want traffic jams. So, what do we do? Precious asked as she helped Mike guide the 3 kids to the counter. Okay, first you order your burger, fine. First, order a burger. Would you like a 1/4 pound? Half a pound? 20 pounds, Mike said. 20 pounds? Asked Audrey. Dad is making fun of us. That's 1 pound, Precious giggled. Then do you want bacon? Cheese? Bacon and cheese? No bacon or cheese. Mike continued. How about half bacon and half cheese? Asked Russell. Now you get the idea, Mike encouraged. Then when will a piece of 100% beef come out? You go to the bar, and this is where the magic begins. You can put over 40 different things on this burger. Boogers? Asked Bertrand. Bertrand, Precious said, pursing his lips disapprovingly. No, we should bring our own, Mike said. But there's blue cheese, there's salsa, There's jalapenos. There's onion straws. Looks like you've been here before, the girl behind the counter smiled. It's been a long time. This used to be my favorite place, Mike admitted. Michelle was almost 20 minutes late. She nodded, confirming that she had seen Mike, then busied herself with ordering and then preparing her burger. Hi, she snapped, slamming the tray down. What are you doing? About 5 months. Mike smiled, looking at the belly. Uh-huh, Michelle said and stuffed her mouth with hamburger. I have 2 months, Precious said, trying to connect with the sullen girl. It feels good, Michelle said. So, Dad, go ahead. You wanted this meeting. Went. Mom says you're getting married this Saturday, Mike said, trying his best not to slap his sassy daughter across her sullen face. Yes, I heard you say, who cares too, Michelle agreed. Anyway, I came to see you get married. Wanted you to meet your brothers and sister, Mike said. Aha, okay, Michelle said, taking a long sip of her soda. I'm Precious, Precious offered. I'm sure you will, Michelle grinned. That's her name, Mike said, gritting his teeth. Precious Morrison. This little cutie is Audrey. I'm 4 years old, Audrey announced. Here comes the big guy, Bertrand, and next to him is Russell, Mike continued. Guys, this is your older sister Michelle. Hello, Bertrand said. I'm 4, Audrey said again. Hi, Russell said. So, you just thought you'd come back and I'd be like, oh, hi, it's great to see you again. Don't worry about how you crap on me, huh? Michelle said mockingly. No, thought you'd say, hey, sorry for being a selfish, narcissistic, arrogant little bitch who thought her shit smells like violets, acted like spending a few minutes with her dad, who broke down for me, was real burden, but I've grown a little since then, but apparently we're both deeply disappointed. Huh? Mike blurted out. Daddy said shit, Audrey whispered to her mother. I know, I heard, Precious said. Precious pinched Audrey's nose. And, I heard you say that too, just now, Precious warned. Oh no, Audrey objected. I just reported on Dad. Okay, don't, Dad, Michelle huffed, pushing the tray, causing her drink to spill. You shouldn't come to my wedding. I don't want you there. No problem, Mike shrugged, grabbing the tray before the soda spilled on any of his kids. We'll leave your gift at your mom's house, Precious suggested as Michelle snuck out of the restaurant. Whatever, bitch, Michelle grumbled and pushed the door open. She said, Audrey began. And if you say that, you'll get it in the butt, understand? Precious warned. So, what do you think of Benny's Burger Bar? Precious asked as they left the restaurant. Next time, I'll put a bunch of pickles, Bertrand said enthusiastically. And barbecue sauce, Russell agreed. Mike smiled at their enthusiasm. He and Precious smiled at each other through the roof of daughter Lyle's minivan as they opened the doors. After they left Precious and the kids at Scooters for ice cream, Mike drove to the address lawyer Barbara Trenton had given him. He checked the address again as he parked in front of a rundown apartment building. Hey, you can't park here. This is my boyfriend's place, okay? Said a guy about 15 or 16. The sign says for guests. Are you saying your boyfriend's name is Guests? Mike responded sharply, taking the wrapped gift from the passenger seat. How about if you give me $5? The guy offered. Don't let that happen and pull up your pants, kid, Mike said. Mike kept his eyes on Lizzie's minivan while he knocked on Rhonda's door. He shuddered. It seemed as if his fist was about to break through the door. What? Who's there, huh? Rhonda's rough voice rang out. What do you want? It's Mike, Mike shouted, still watching the minivan. I came to leave a wedding gift for Michelle. Yeah, I heard the meeting went well, Rhonda grinned mockingly, yanking the door open. Where's Barbie? Who? Mike asked, handing her a gift. Your little Texas wife, Rhonda mocked. Oh, go to hell, you pathetic bitch, Mike snorted. I thought you would choose someone better, but you don't like that I did that, huh? Rhonda grabbed the gift. By the way, great trade. I think I'll keep mine. Mike smiled and turned around. Mike paid no attention to the shouting tirade behind him. He walked down the stairs and opened the minivan door. Hey, got my eye on the wheels for you. Dollar, huh? The guy asked. Baby, pull up your pants. Do you realize how stupid you look? Mike barked and slammed the minivan door. The guy showed Mike the fact. Mike started the engine and put the minivan into gear. He laughed as the guy, eyes wide with fear, tried to run back and fell on his butt. Mike shifted into reverse and texted Precious that he was on his way to Scooters. Dad, I bought you a double chocolate coating, Precious said as Mike walked into Scooters. And I bought you a big wet kiss, Mike said and kissed Precious, making a lot of noise. Michael, stop it, Precious laughed as their children laughed. Mike's meeting with Mickey went a little better than his meeting with Michelle. Just like 10 years ago, the 17-year-old was gloomy and silent. He didn't even lift his head from the table when Mike tried to start a conversation. Oh, and thanks for the damn Benny's Burger Bar gift cards, Mickey eventually snorted. You're welcome, Mike replied easily. Hey, $10 doesn't buy you anything at Benny's, Mickey said. I know. A quarter pound with fries and a drink is at least 14, Mike smiled. So why the hell did you only send a $10 gift card? Mickey was indignant, his voice growing angry. So that you have to put your greedy little hand in your own pocket. Finally spend a little, Mike smiled. Eh? Mickey didn't understand. Anyway, good luck at the trial next Thursday, Mike said, standing up. Why did you even come here? Mickey demanded. Honestly, I wanted to see if there was anything left of that boy, Mike admitted. I saw your sister. There's nothing left there. There's nothing left of that little girl who played tree in first grade. She was supposed to be a tree, but she kept looking at me and smiling, waving at me. What? What kind of tree is this? Mickey shouted. And I was hoping that there would be something left of that little guy who went fishing with me. Remember when you caught a rainbow trout? God, it was a fish, said Mike. 6.5 pounds, Mickey said quietly. Yeah, and the first thing your mother said, I'm not cleaning this thing, Mike said as the bailiff opened the door. But how did she eat those fillets, huh? Hey, how did you get all those fillets out of that fish? Mickey suddenly asked. I ran to Niedermeyer's and bought 3 more trout. Mike laughed and went out into the hallway. Dad, Mickey screamed as the heavy door slammed shut. Precious kept her word. Mike made an attempt to reconnect with his children. He even talked to Barbara Trenton about helping Mickey. The stern-faced woman pursed her lips and demanded $3,000 from Mike, but represented Michael Arthur Morrison Jr. at trial. Through Barbara Trenton, Mike learned that Mickey had been sentenced to 2 years. Since the sentence was longer than a year, he had to serve it in the Colorado State Penitentiary, but Barbara managed to get him placed in 5 tribes, a medium-security prison. A few months after this news, Mike learned that he had become a grandfather. Michelle Shrinton gave birth to Louise Charlotte Shrinton, a baby weighing 3 pounds 2 ounces. 3 pounds? Precious asked. Michael, this is not normal. And through Barbara, Mike learned that his granddaughter did not live to see her first week. The tears Mike shed were genuine as he wrote a letter of condolence to his daughter and her estranged husband, Alan Charles Shrinton. On the first Tuesday of the month, 3 weeks before Precious gave birth, Mike stood in the crowd on the steps of the Oakleaf County Courthouse for a foreclosed property auction. This day was especially hot for the first Tuesday in March. Mike didn't envy the auctioneer, who stood there in a suit and tie. And now it's 417 Acorn Drive, Great Oak. This is 417 Acorn Drive, Great Oak, Texas, the auctioneer announced. Really? Not Great Oak, Oklahoma, the man said sarcastically. And the court admits that Mr. Robert Wurtson just made a bet of what? 1 million, 2 million, the auctioneer mocked. Cancelled, Bobby shouted. It's not funny, cried the little man. "This is my damn house, not some fucking joke." Having said this, the man rushed at the auctioneer. He was waving a knife. The guard knocked him down. The little man tumbled forward. Mike, standing 3 feet from the auctioneer, did not feel the knife plunge into his neck. He felt a warmth as something seeped into his light cotton shirt. Mike collapsed onto the marble steps of the court. He did not hear the screams and screams of the men and one woman around him. His gaze was drawn to the Texas sun, which was just beginning to rise above the horizon. He looked straight at the sun. Mike knew that the sun must have been burning his eyes, must have been a blinding light. But this was not the case. "My dad is in heaven," Audrey announced as Rhonda and Michelle entered the funeral home. "I'm sure it is," Michelle sobbed, heartbroken. Michelle's screams turned to screams when she saw her father's body in the coffin. Rhonda's quiet tears turned into low moans of pain. Reverend Brandon Wright performed the quiet, low-key ceremony. He urged those gathered to remember Michael Arthur Morrison as he was during his lifetime. A man who loved God, loved his family, loved Texas. "If anyone wants to come out and say a few words about our friend, our neighbor, our brother," Brandon asked quietly. Before Precious or Carmen, their housekeeper, could stop her, Audrey was already galloping up the steps. "Don't cry," she said in a clear, strong voice. "That's it. Don't cry. My dad is in heaven, and he wants you to know that he loves you." With that, Audrey walked back down the steps and sat down next to her mother. She took Precious's hand. Some men who worked with Mike on houses described him as a good, honest, and fair boss. Several people mentioned that Mike was a good, hard worker, but when it was time to call it a day, he was the first to talk about it. He, was always in a hurry to get home, more than one person said. The procession to Great Hope Cemetery was long. Mike was buried under the hot Texas sun. Precious placed her hand on the smooth wooden coffin, whispered, "Love you, Michael," and took Audrey and Bertrand's hands. Carmen tried to take Russell's hand, but he turned abruptly and took his older sister's hand, and then solemnly walked towards the limousine with Michelle. They quietly followed their mother and siblings. "Tell me about Dad," Russell asked as the limousine door closed. 3 days after the funeral, Teresa White, Mike's lawyer, held the reading of the will. The will was quite simple. All property, all money was to go to Precious, the wife of Michael Arthur Morrison SR. Mike has already set up trusts for Russell, Bertrand, Audrey, and Olivia. Each of the 4 funds began at $250,000. Precious was to be the trustee of these funds until the children graduated from college or reached the age of 25, whichever came first. The only exceptions were the $100,000 insurance policies Mike took out when Michelle was born and the $100,000 insurance he took out when Mickey was born. Michelle and Mickey were beneficiaries of these policies. When Alan Shrinton learned of Michelle's sudden wealth, he tried to make peace with her. When Michelle refused, he tried to sue her for $100,000. Since Alan initiated the divorce and the petition was filed before her father's death, Alan would receive nothing. Michelle invested half the money into buying a 2-bedroom bungalow and, after some deliberation, invited her mother Rhonda to move in with her. The 2 women immediately began arguing from the moment Rhonda walked through the door with her modest box of belongings. After his release from 5 tribes, Mickey spent $1,000 of his inheritance on escorts and $2,000 on heroin. Rhonda used some of the remaining money from Mickey's inheritance to bury Michael Arthur Morrison Jr. in the plot next to his father at Great Hope Cemetery. Alone in the cemetery, Rhonda stood and looked at 2 gravestones. Then she shook her head sadly. Her son and her husband now lay hundreds of miles from home. She didn't kill them, but Rhonda knew she pushed them both away because of her selfishness, her desire for more. "Mike, Mickey, sorry," Rhonda said. "I'm so sorry." Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.